We shall not be moved. We shall not be moved like a tree that's planted by the water. We shall not be moved.
Georgia is better, and we know that we are here to turn up the heat on this very, very chilly day. My name is Jeff Graham. I'm the Executive Director at Georgia Equality. I am also with the Georgia Unites Against Discrimination campaign. Our focus, our message today is not just to say that these religious exemption bills are bad for Georgia and dangerous for so many of us. We're also here today to say that when Georgia unites against discrimination, we can say that our state is a livable state. It's a welcoming state for tourists. It's a state that has a better business environment, and it's a state that can have a reputation of leading the new South.
All right.
That's the Georgia that we all deserve. We know that there are many, many bills that have been introduced in this session that would create exemptions for some people of faith, so that they would not have to follow the same laws that the rest of us have to follow. That is dangerous territory. And our opponents who say that these bills are harmless have shown their true colors. They showed their true colors here in Georgia when last year a bill had amendment added to it that explicitly stated that the government had a compelling interest to ensure that non-discrimination laws on a local, state, and federal level were followed. When that amendment was attached, the supporters of the bill said in their own words that it gutted the true intent of the bill, and they're the ones who tabled it. So we know that it is about discrimination. We have also heard that these so-called religious refusal bills don't offer any harm. Last week in Indiana, a state that last year passed legislation similar to the legislation that we're debating this year in Georgia, several extreme conservative groups have filed suit in multiple municipalities saying that municipal ordinances that protect the LGBT against discrimination are an affront to their religious views in their very existence, and have challenged the legality of having local ordinances that provide inclusive non-discrimination protections. So yes, when we say that these bills are vehicles to discriminate against various communities, that is our proof. The words and actions of local supporters of those bills here in Georgia, as well as the words and actions of supporters of similar bills around the country. But it's not enough to just say no. We know that Georgia and Mississippi are the only two states that don't have civil rights protections. We know that Georgia is one of only 5 states with no statewide public accommodations civil rights bill. thanks to a few bipartisan legislators, we actually have legislation that would give us a public accommodations bill here in Georgia. That's the good news. That's something we can all stand behind. Unfortunately, that bill is not the right bill. It's far too restrictive on who is covered. Yesterday, we asked them to please consider adding sex, age, disability, veteran status, sexual orientation, gender identity, and yes, religion to the public accommodations bill. Unfortunately, they rejected it, but we hope that that is just the first step of the process and we can get those categories added this year. And if those categories will not be added this year, then we will continue to remain united as various communities to work for the civil rights, the protections of all of us that worry about discrimination here in Georgia. That's the message of our rally today.
Hello, I'm former State Representative Simone Bell and the current Southeastern Regional Director for Lambda Legal. There is nothing godly about writing discrimination into the law. There is nothing godly about seeking to have rights for only those people who believe as you do. There is nothing godly about seeking to harm individuals who are fighting for their rights to simply be. There is nothing godly about using your role in government to turn back the hands of time and to stop progress. Yet, this is what too many of our elected state senators and representatives are spending our tax dollars to do in the name of their distorted and ideological views of Christianity, which by name calls them to be like Jesus, Christ-like, focused on love, equality of all people, and most of all, justice. We stand here today as a sign and a warning that we will not allow false religious rhetoric to hold us back. Rhetoric that only seems to be focused on particular groups of people and policies. The notion of religious freedom is protected in our Constitution, a Constitution that many hold dear until such time as it does not fit their old and tired narratives of who is worthy of protections. It is a travesty that in 2016, we just now see fit to pass a civil rights bill in Georgia. 52 years after the Civil Rights Act of 1964. It is immoral aptitude to do so in the 21st century and remain obstinate to a changing society and world, to hold on to the ideas of supremacy of one human over another. It is a travesty in 2016 to think that you have a right to determine the freedoms and pursuit of happiness over another individual's existence under the guise of you not making it to heaven and accept that we are all created equal. If holding me back for my highest good is the basis of your religious freedom, then I implore you to dig deep and ask yourself, why would I be held accountable for the lives of those whom I have never met? But you have met us. You've met lesbian, gay, and transgender people. You have seen our humanity, our desire to make the world a better place, our desire to be left alone and treated equally. How do I know that you have met us? Because you have met me. You have heard my stories of discrimination, and I have shared with you the stories of my brothers and sisters. I sat at dinner tables with you. I sat in committee meetings with you. I have had one-on-one conversations with you about my life and struggles as an out lesbian, and how your attitude, rhetoric, and refusal to let go of your sincerely held beliefs are dangerous at best and shameful in the least. Yesterday, we heard Representative Tom Weldon, who is one of the persons I've had conversations with, on how the misguided so-called religious freedom legislation is harmful to me, to my family, to my community. And he said, and I quote, "Those who get bullied usually are the ones that end up doing well on down the road in life." This from the chair of the Juvenile Justice Committee. So many are happy to say that they are from the woods of Georgia, from the small towns of our state. Well, I implore you to come out of the woods, to look beyond your small towns of our state. I implore you to use Google to find out what you do not know or understand, and to stand against discrimination of all forms. At Lambda Legal, we are extremely disappointed that Georgia's anti-gay lawmakers are once again trying to allow religious discrimination in so many areas of life for Georgia's families, workers, and others. We have seen this over and over. Bills that say they are about protecting one thing, when the real goal is to target and discriminate against LGBT people, with vast implications for everyone. These bills are divisive, and they are dangerous. It encourages discrimination, invites litigation, and collides with the fundamental rights protected under the U.S. Constitution. As written, these bills will upend the balance between religious freedom and freedom for imposition on others' religious beliefs. They provide special protections for people to justify discrimination. Lambda Legal urges the Georgia General Assembly to halt these bills before they cause damage and leave havoc between neighbors, employee and employer, customer and company, and landlord and tenant. Freedom of religion is already strongly protected by federal and state law.
When you see a person pursuing another to do him harm, you must intervene. Our religious principles and our faith demand that we step up to protect others against harm. As a Jewish American, I treasure the religious freedom afforded to me in this country and protected by the First Amendment of the Constitution of the United States of America. I am free to practice my religion, to observe my faith traditions and rituals as I see fit. Indeed, as a conservative rabbi ordained by the Jewish Theological Seminary of America, I am free to choose to officiate or not officiate at religious ceremonies as I deem appropriate. I do not need a Religious Freedom Restoration or Pastor Protection Act to exercise my rights as a Jewish American or a member of the Jewish clergy. These bills, now working their way through our state legislature, use words like freedom and protection to misdirect our attention away from their true purpose, which is to allow discrimination under the guise of religion. Like a wolf in sheep's clothing, this legislation seeks to harm the most vulnerable members of our society, citizens without protections under our state's constitution and without legal recourse against discrimination. Today, on this cold morning, I left my students at school with another teacher and the faculty so that I could model for them how we take action as Jews when our Torah, when our values require us, demand us to take action. Like the ancient rabbis, I understand that it is my religious duty to intervene, to stop the pursuer about to do harm. I cannot sit idly by while my neighbors are threatened, by laws that would allow discrimination against them, while each and every one of us is threatened by the narrowest interpretation of God. The God I worship is not small. The God I worship has an expansive love for all humanity. This legislation will not protect our religious freedom, nor defend our right to worship that God. This legislation will actually prevent us from living up to our religious ideals and principles. My Jewish faith requires that we love our neighbors. My faith demands that we not mistreat our neighbors. My faith insists that we see every human being as created in God's image. We must intervene before the pursuers do harm. We must stop these discriminatory bills before they become law. Thank you.
First of all, I'm representing the Georgia NAACP with our president, Dr. Francis Johnson. We're an organization of 107 years that began to combat discrimination, lynchings, and we are proud of our ecumenical and our interreligious heritage. As a pastor, my job is to remind my people that the greatest gift that has been given is freedom. The freedom that God has chosen to give you and me that enable us to live our lives as we see fit. Right. I believe that the freedom of religion is one of the most fundamental rights we have as children of God and citizens of the United States. As a Lutheran pastor, ELCA, I want to protect that freedom. I just want to recognize those who I stand with, Lutheran lay persons that have been in the fray for so long. Bob Gibling, Frank Lewin, and my colleague who's behind me, Pastor Nancy Christensen, pastor of St. John Lutheran Church here in Atlanta. One of the few reconciling in Christ congregations, and we're so proud to stand as Lutheran pastors. This is why I am so grateful that freedom of religion is protected in the First Amendment. This is why I am so grateful that this is protected. However, this is also why I'm so disappointed at the religious exemption bills that are popping up in the legislature too fast for me to keep track. Freedom of religion is too important to close to our hearts for us to stand by and watch as discrimination attempts to rename itself religious freedom and hope that we do not notice. We have noticed. We're standing here as a united front saying that we have noticed legislatures of our great state walking around like Lady Macbeth with their hands still figuratively dripping with evidence of harm to humankind. As found in the book of the prophet Isaiah, Chapter 1, the bloody hands I am referring to is stained by injustice and indifference. We are here today not to storm the Capitol, which is not a bad option, but to give warning that the stain of injustice will not stand for those who oppress, because the moral arc of the universe bends and will continue to bend toward justice. But to help that arc along the way, we have to reach out to our governmental leaders. We have to act, our communities, and in our houses of worship have to find our brothers and sisters across the street and make sure they know that RFRA and the First Amendment Defense Act and these so-called religious freedom bills do not represent us. Silence on these issues is dangerous. It is crucial that we recognize the harms that could be done to LGBT persons. But these misguided bills have the potential to go even further to discrimination against minority religions. Georgia is one of only 2 states, yes, Georgia, the seat of Georgia, Atlanta, the city too busy to hate, that doesn't have a broad statewide non-discrimination law. But we should and we will be working toward these goals, not these toxic laws that attempt to divide, not defend. Thank you.
Of the future, we want to win elections in the future. We want to reach out to millennials. We want to reach out to African Americans. We want to reach out to the Latino community. We want to reach out to women. We also want to reach out to the LGBT community as well, because the party has shut the door and we want to open the door. We represent over 2,000 conservatives, yes, conservatives across the state that believe in inclusion, that believe in tolerance, and that stand against the perception of discrimination and the impact that has to our party. We are Republicans. We are conservative, and for Representative Weldon, we are from the woods as well. I'm from Hall County, and I'm not from Fulton County. We have members from Rabun County. We have members from Cherokee County. We have members from Milledgeville. We have members from across the state. We want them to understand that there are implications that occur when you pass legislation that hurts members of our citizenry. We want to go over some quick statistics with you that have kind of helped us as we've talked about this. Over 80% of Republican millennials support LGBT non-discrimination. 80%. Over 60% of Republicans across this country believe that discriminating against the LGBT community is wrong. And over 80% of small businesses, mom and pop businesses, believe that there should be protections against the LGBT community. There is nothing controversial about our position. There is nothing divisive about our position because we are in the majority, not just the majority of this state, but the majority of the Republican Party. And this organization serves as an opportunity to give those people an opportunity to speak out against something that can hurt our ability to win elections. And we want to win voters that we've lost in the past. One instance that we would like to highlight is that as we've traveled the state and we've talked to young Republicans and we've talked to college Republicans, the number one issue they have that impacts expanding their membership is the perception that they are seen as anti-gay. That is not who we are. It is 2016, and our party is bigger than issues or legislation that divides us. We are the party of free markets. We are the party of expanded opportunity, and we are the party of individual liberty and respect. It is high time that members of our party recognize what year it is, and it is high time they recognize the impact certain legislation does on the brand of our party. Thank you so much. Join our cause, and thank you for being here today.
My name is Raymond Partolin, and I speak on behalf of Asian Americans Advancing Justice Atlanta, the first nonprofit law and advocacy center dedicated to the civil, social, and economic rights of Asian immigrants and refugees in Georgia and the Southeast. Today, we stand in solidarity with Georgia Equality and other organizations in opposition to the multiple versions of the Religious Freedom Restoration Act and other similar bills under consideration. Because these bills lack anti-discrimination provisions, they would give private individuals and businesses the license to discriminate against minorities under the guise of religion. This directly impacts Asian Americans, who are one of the most diverse demographic groups here in the state of Georgia. Asian Americans represent over 30 countries and many more ethnicities. We practice a multitude of faiths, including Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, and Sikhism. More than 4% of our community identify as LGBT. Interpreted broadly, these bills could deny them basic services, such as protection against crime, medical care, marriage licenses, and non-discrimination in hiring practices, not to mention the refusal of goods and services. Bills like the Pastor Protection Act, or HB 757, would allow religious organizations to refuse to rent, sell, or lease their property for a purpose that is religiously objectionable. Again, there is no anti-discrimination provision in that bill. This would have a direct impact on poor or marginalized communities. 30% of Asian Americans here in the state of Georgia live under the poverty line. At least 2% of the Asian American population in Georgia is homeless. This bill would allow religious organizations to discriminate against those seeking shelter at a church or looking to rent affordable apartment units in buildings owned by religious organizations. Our organization stands firmly against any bills that have the potential to harm our community. We call on Asian Americans and all of our allies to pick up the phone and call their representatives and senators and tell them to say no to bills that restrict our individual freedoms. We came to this country in the search of the American dream. An America in which we don't have the freedom to buy goods and services from certain businesses. An America in which we don't have access to basic...
Baptist Church. I'm part of a team of pastors, a bold, inclusive, creative congregation. And yes, I am a Baptist. In 17... I appreciate those prayers. In 1788, it was a Baptist named John Leland who met James Madison in a field and talked and petitioned him to include freedom of religion in the First Amendment of the United States Constitution. And it was in 1961 when another Baptist pastor gathered together with a group of students from CME, Kojic, atheist, agnostic protesters, attempted to simply have a meal in the Magnolia Tea Room at Rich's department store, a few blocks from here. They were arrested because at that time our state and federal laws enshrined segregation and discrimination. And in his writing, Dr. King to the judge said, "We have done this to awaken the dozing conscience of our community." He stood in a broad, diverse coalition in those days. And in 1993, a broad, diverse coalition took to the Hill in Washington, D.C. to pass a federal Religious Freedom Restoration Act. How diverse, you say? Oh, as diverse as Indigenous peoples, Unitarians, and James Dobson. You see, that is where the multitude of people stood. That is where the broad coalition was in 1993. But it's 2016 now. And where do we find the broad coalition? Here, I may suggest. In voices from all over this great state. In voices as diverse as Baptists in Dalton, Unitarians in Columbus, CME in Savannah, and Jews in Sandy Springs. This is where we find ourselves now, bound together by a common ideal, love for neighbor. Love that some of my other Baptist brethren seem to have forgotten about.
Who are out here saying that LGBT young people and communities matter. They're saying reproductive justice matters. And we stand in solidarity with our brothers and sisters today on this issue. Thank you.